The House will come to order. This morning, the pledge will be led by Representative Don Wilson from House District 20.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Schiebel, please call the roll.
Representatives Amabile. Rep. Amabile. Oh. Armagost. Bacon. Byrd. Bockenfeld. Basenecker. Bottoms. Bradfield. Bradley. Catlin. Doherty. DeGraff. Degree Kennedy. Representative Degree Kennedy. Dixon. Duran. Majority Leader Duran is excused. English. Epps. Evans. Frizzell. Froelich. Garcia. Gonzalez Gutierrez. Hamrick. Hartsook. Herod. Representative Herod.
Excused.
Holtorf. Judah. Joseph. Kip. Leader. Rep leaders excused. Lindsay. Linstead. Luck. Lukens. Lynch. Mabry. Marshall. Martinez. Representative Morrow's excused. McCormick. McLaughlin. Michelson Janae. Ortiz. Parenti. Puglisi. Representative Puglisi. Representative Ricks. Sharbini. Sirota. Representative Snyder is excused. Soper. Rep Soper is also excused. Story. Taggart. Titone. Valdez. Rep Valdez.
Excused.
Velasco. Vigil. Weinberg. Weissman. Wilford. Wilson. Winter. Woodrow. Representative Woodrow.
Excused.
Young. And Madam Speaker.
Here. Members, with 57 present, 7 excused, and 1 vacancy, we do have a quorum. Okay, Representative Wilson, the last and final day.
Members, being the end of the week, I ask that we show some support for our chief clerk and how he corrects the journal. So, Madam Speaker, I move that the journal of Thursday, January 26, 2023 be approved as corrected by the chief clerk.
Members, you have heard the motion that the journal be approved as corrected by the chief clerk. All those in favor, say aye. Aye! That was brilliant. All those opposed, no. The motion is adopted. Representative Wilson, well played. Members, our first order of business today is the consideration of memorials, but I believe we are anticipating the arrival of the Senate. We will stand in a brief recess until our senators are able to join us. The House will come back to order. Members, we are to the consideration of memorials. Mr. Schiebel, please read the title of House Memorial 1001.
House Memorial 1001 by Representatives Lynch and Bradfield. Memorializing Representative Hugh McKean.
Minority Leader Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We move the adoption of House Memorial 23-1001 and request that it be read at length.
Mr. Schiebel, please read the memorial.
Whereas our beloved colleague Hugh Monroe McKean, leader of the Republican caucus and representative of Loveland, departed this life on October 30th, 2022 at the age of 55. And whereas born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania on October 27th, 1967, he spent his boyhood on a small farm in northern Missouri, where he said he first learned how to fix things. And whereas eventually Leader McKean made his way to Colorado, where he graduated from Colorado State University in 1996. And whereas a passionate patriot, in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, he joined the Coast Guard Auxiliary as a reservist. And whereas self-described as a farm boy with a servant's heart, Leader McKean worked as an independent residential contractor across northern Colorado and was active in local government. He built homes and bridges between people, forged authentic and genuine connections, and always listened and learned. And whereas Leader McKean served his friends, his neighbors, and his community as a charter school board and a school district master planning board, and then, beginning in 2009, on the Loveland City Council for 2 terms, a role that showed his commitment to finding durable solutions to local and regional problems. And whereas elected to the Colorado House of Representatives in 2016 to represent House District 51, Leader McKean wrote in his newsletter, Love Where I Live, that he was blessed to help shepherd our wonderful state towards greener pastures and happier days. And whereas elected leader of the Colorado House Republican Caucus in 2020, Leader McKean was known not only for his dedication to the people he served, but also for his rowdy sense of humor, boundless energy, and infectious laughter, which he used to break down barriers and solve problems. And whereas Leader McKean could argue in the well against a member's bill for hours, then offer them the warmest of hugs and link arms on the way to a committee meeting. He could be found debating policy with colleagues or chatting with children on the floor, giving them spirited tours of the Capitol and toys to play with in his office. And whereas, raised as a Quaker, Leader McKean's personal society of friends was always expanding. Whether you were on the custodial staff in the Capitol building or a member of Congress, Leader McKean saw you and he heard you as a potential collaborator and as a friend. And whereas more than 50 of the bills that Leader McKean sponsored were signed by the governor, including bills to support community-based public safety partnerships, promote behavioral health crisis services to school-age students, assist land developers in providing affordable housing, utilize pumped hydroelectricity generation to meet Colorado's renewable energy standard, and offer hunter education courses to 7th grade students. And whereas, honored by a wide variety of organizations for his achievements, Leader McKean received the Faith, Family, and Freedom Award from the Centennial Institution. He was named 2021's Legislator of the Year by the Colorado Bioscience Association and one of 2023's Legislators of the Year by the Colorado Chamber of Commerce. He was given the Champion of Main Street Award by the Independent Community Bankers of Colorado, and he won the Colorado House of Representatives Chili Contest 2 years in a row. And whereas Leader McKean spoke about Coloradans not in the abstract, but as real, living people with jobs, loves, and real-life successes and problems. As he said in a speech to the Chamber in January 2021, in the end, the letters by our names are less important than the ideas we have. The people of Colorado just want to know that we care about them, that their voices are heard, and that we are trying our best to make their lives better and give them opportunities to thrive. And whereas, as Leader McKean laid in state at the Colorado State Capitol, surrounded by his family and fellow lawmakers, by the staff and stakeholders who worked with him and for him, and by all others who mourned him, Weld County Commissioner Scott James reminded us to live like Hugh, laugh like Hugh, serve like Hugh, and love like Hugh. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 74th General Assembly of the State of Colorado that in the death of Hugh Monroe McKean, the people of the state of Colorado have lost a devoted public servant, outstanding citizen, and invaluable friend and colleague who will be remembered for his legacy of kindness and leadership. That we, the members of the Colorado House of Representatives, do hereby extend our deep and heartfelt sympathy to the members of his family, and that we pay tribute to a man who served his state well and faithfully. May the memory of his laughter in the chamber and throughout the hallways, committee rooms, and even as far as the cafeteria continue to bless this building that he loved.
Minority Leader Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I would also like to extend a thank you for the grace that this building, your party, and the governor have extended for us to honor our friend. And as I was thinking about what to say here, I was thinking Hugh would probably say, okay, enough. We've done this. Stop. Get back to work. And then Amy reminded me that you'd be like, yeah, okay, give me a little more of that. Just a little more. So for those of you who have never met Hugh, you know, it's very appropriate that he represented the town of Loveland, because what you heard in that tribute was a whole lot of love. He literally was the happiest guy you've ever met. And no matter what was going on, or where we were at, or what time of night it was, Hugh was happy. But he was happy kind of in this big kid way, which always made you just a little curious about what he had up his sleeve. And he had this particular twinkle in his eye that you knew something was up. And you made sure to check your chair when you went back, there was no whoopee cushion in there or some other sort of fun deal. He loved. And he told you that every time you left him. He said, I love you, brother. He loved his children. He loved his town of Loveland. He loved his best friend, Amy, with all of his heart. He loved to tinker and build and make things. His latest project was he was building a house, and he loved that project, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention that he did not love the fees it took to get that building out of the ground, which we'll discuss more this year. He loved his friends. He loved this building, and he loved this institution, and he knew more about it than most. He took the time to see what he was getting himself into. I would encourage all of you, since the majority of the folks in this room are new members, to do that same thing, to find the love for this building and what has gone into it and what has come into it and gone out of it. And while you're doing that, think a little bit about Hugh. And then I thought about what I'd like to say to Hugh right now, but I realized we didn't have a device that bleeps out some of the words I'd like to say, as he is, as I have inherited his position here. So I'll leave that out. But I just want Hugh to know that he's missed and that I love you, brother.
Representative Bradfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam Speaker. The first time I met Hugh McKean, he came down to Colorado Springs really to interview me because I was a candidate for the election for House District 21. And we had lunch together, and former Representative Lois Landgraf was there. And quite frankly, the conversation at lunch was more between Hugh and Lois than I. And it had to do with things that were going on here. And I never once felt left out because as Hugh was always talking to Lois, his eyes would always slip over and just smile at me. So that was the first time I met Hugh, and when he left, he said, I'll see you up at the Capitol right after election. Well, I did come up to the Capitol right after the election, and Hugh was here, and that was the first tour I ever had of this marvelous building. Hugh gave me a personalized tour with history with stories, with a great deal of emotion and appreciation for the building. And I have never forgotten that. I have never forgotten that every time I was in his presence, he always says, "Mary, I love you." And for those reasons, I think many of us in this room have heard that from him. And it's always, we walked away a little bit lighter, a little bit happier, feeling just a little bit better. I thank you for allowing me to have my memory of Hugh, and I know that there are others who would like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you both. I would now like to invite current members who would like to pay tribute to our beloved Hugh McKean. Speaker Pro Tem Kennedy, Degree Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You all have heard this before, and you'll hear it again, but Hugh was the epitome of the happy warrior. The work we do down here is hard. The nights are long, the conversations are tough, and I know, speaking for myself, sometimes it is hard to keep a smile on your face as you kind of go through those difficult conversations. But I rarely, if ever, saw Hugh without a smile on his face. And we had some fierce debates and some tough negotiations. And yet what the minority leader is saying about the I love you was not just true within his own party. I got a big bear hug after every tough conversation we had that really expressed the spirit that we can disagree without being disagreeable. That doesn't mean we leave our principles at the door, but what it means is we recognize our common humanity. And Hugh spoke to that every single day with how he approached the work in this building more than anyone else. Now, I remember first meeting him when we went through freshman orientation together 6 years ago. And I think my first impression was, man, this guy can talk. But what I usually found very quickly was I was either smiling or laughing at what he had to say, which spoke to kind of the disarming way that he put himself out there and extended the spirit of love in this place. Now, I regret that the last exchange we had was one where he was making a joke and I was being really uptight. And I thought about that a lot since he passed, thinking about how, man, I should have just laughed with him in that moment. Because there was no reason to be disagreeable. It wasn't even a big deal. And yet, I chose to be uptight in that moment, and he didn't. And he was the one who was doing the right thing. And so, as we think about the work that lies ahead of us this session, what I remember most is that when Hugh and I would be having a debate at this podium over a policy that we both cared deeply about with very different perspectives, we would fight, we would do what we would try to do, we would try to win the day. But regardless of what happened, there would be a handshake and a hug and a genuine inquiry about how are you, how's your family, how's your life. It was not just on the surface. He really wanted to know, and he kind of invited you to rise to the level that he was at and to be a better person in that same way. So as we go ahead this session and think about the tough conversations that we will be having, I hope every one of us, after the fight ends at this podium, we go shake hands, exchange a hug, if you're so inclined, and ask with genuine interest about each other's lives and families. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Michelson-Janae.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you, members, for this opportunity to remember a really great man. I remember the first time I met him. I was on a tour of UC Health, which was going to be in my district if I had won, and he was on that tour as well. And he was just giving me the third degree, asking me all the questions, and I'm like, who is this guy? But big smile on his face, had no idea if he was a Democrat or Republican. Like, there was no way of figuring him out. He just wanted to know who I was, and we came in the same class. So coming in the same class with Hugh was really uplifting. There's a picture somewhere in there of our whole class on our first sine die. We were a really big class like you have now. And I just remember figuring out who he was, and part of figuring out who Hugh was every year I have had the honor of sponsoring the Holocaust Memorial Resolution. Today happens to be the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. When Hugh was here, he came up and spoke about his connection to the Holocaust every single year. He talked about his time in Israel and how much he experienced there. He talked about going to Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial Museum in Israel, and how he experienced that time there. And for him, not being directly connected to losing family in the Holocaust, you wouldn't know it from the way his emotions spilled over out into this chamber when he came and shared. We have members in this chamber who've lost family in Auschwitz, and it's important to know that allies like Hugh McKean are the reason why we continue to commemorate what was such a horrible experience. His love, his graciousness, and his power in this space made for a memorial that was ever so meaningful. So I think it's appropriate that today we memorialize him on the 75th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz, because I think he would have wanted it that way.
Thank you. Representative Weissman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I didn't really write anything down about today, but I think I've decided it's appropriate to come up and share just a few things about Hugh anyway. There was that photo up here of all those of us who came in 16 and like our Speaker Pro Tem and like my colleague from Adams County, I was part of that class, and the way that elections and people go in for other political offices and the rest of life goes is there's a lot fewer of us left here from coming in 17 than there were in that rather large group. It seems like a long time ago, and I guess it was in the pre-COVID years, but I served with Hugh for 2 years on judiciary, and he would always dish out sort of the jokes in equal measure, the jokes at himself for not being a lawyer and the jokes at the rest of us for being lawyers. I think that was about fair. It was in that time, and we actually built upon this legislation more recently. I was doing a bill to try to have our state surface better data about who's in our county jail and why. One of the things we talk about in judiciary, and Hugh was my co-prime sponsor, both in 19 and then again last year. And part of where I think he was coming from was it just made sense to him because his county, Larimer County, had gotten out in front of the rest of the state and had a similar thing, just a basic transparency measure. And we disagreed on a number of things, but we agreed on that thing twice. And I think that's important. It's easy for us to focus on the disagreement here. It's certainly easy on, news media to focus on disagreement, but particularly in the context of there tending to be those disagreements, I think, where we can find ways that we line up with each other, it becomes all the more important, for that reason. I think one of the moments the Pro Tem was speaking of was a bill that he and I were doing together, and as Republican leader, it was Hugh's job to come here and really bring the heat and channel more than anybody else would the feelings of the Republican caucus, and that's okay. But what I remember is, I would be here with the Pro Tem, and we'd be making our best case, and then we'd step off to the side, and Hugh would come up and make his best case, and his voice might go up a little bit. And then somebody else would come up, and we'd both be standing over here trading jokes about the bill. And we'd go back to it, and the vote would happen. It's not always that way, but if you're going to get the heat up here, and that's what this little spot that I'm standing in right now is about, that's probably the way that it should be. I have an aunt and uncle who've lived for a long time outside of Philadelphia, and if you're somebody who has memories of, I think, the woodlands of the east, and then you come further west, you never forget those memories. And I also remember standing over here just trading stories about those parts of Pennsylvania. I think maybe just the last thing that I want to share, at the risk of this being a bit heavy, As it happened, I was in a car going to northern Colorado with a colleague that morning when we all got the news. Maybe somehow it made sense that we were going, to Hugh's approximate corner of the state. We were going to join a colleague of ours. And I just remember the shock. Sometimes things hit you in life and you don't know in advance. And they burn in and you remember, maybe forever, where you were, how it felt when you found something out. I was sitting in the passenger seat of my colleague's car who was driving, and I was getting the news coming in on my phone. I thought, wow, he just wasn't that old. It's just not right. So to me, it's interesting to contrast what all we're doing here with the recent memorial for Rep. And then Senator Wham, who served here many decades ago and went on and as we saw, became an example to people post her time here and lived a good, long life. And if we memorialize a colleague, that's how it's supposed to happen. It's not supposed to happen this way. He's too young. But here we are. So, to the family and others who were particularly close to him, I just want to say, I'm sorry, it's too soon. We may be on opposite sides here, but I think the point is there's things bigger than that, and I'm certainly going to remember Hugh as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Assistant Majority Leader Bacon.
Thank you, and it's wonderful to see all the faces here. Many of you may not know me in what I'd love to call my gregarious personality. And the first time, and I say that because maybe a couple of days ago, kind of marched my way over to the minority leader's office. The minority leader wasn't there, but the staff was, and I just looked around like, who's here? Where are the snacks? It was like, I need to be received. And, to the thanks of the staff, they weren't necessarily shocked by that. But the only reason that I felt I could even do that and to, quite frankly, come by and say hello was because of Hugh McKean. The first time I met him was after we were recently elected. We all went down to Colorado Springs to talk about how we can build relationships across the aisle. And he just reminded me of all of those stories of the statesman, right? When we all think about politics or maybe some of our favorite myths, if you will, about Washington, D.C., we think about the hard worker who is willing to go into spaces that they may have felt like they couldn't. And Hugh was one who made me feel like that he said, you don't have to be afraid to come back into this corner. And I'm like, I'm not scared of anything. And he's like, I think maybe you are. Because some of the conversations that we had in our first weeks of session for me were very difficult ones. We had to have some conversations on behalf of myself, on behalf of the Black Caucus, of what it meant for all of us to lean into our experiences, our lives, and our stories to come and to want to come serve in this building. And whenever I asked him for counsel, he was always willing to give it. He also gave very bad advice, like saying if your fiscal note is very big, just cut it down to a little piece of paper so that you can honestly say, look how small the fiscal note is, even though it said $1 billion. Just with a B. Anyway, and so I do want to say to the family and all of our colleagues that my commitment, and I think the commitment of many of us, is to really bring a sense of statesmanship to this work, to see each other, to meet each other where we can. He too, we had to go to lunch because we had a challenge in the first week. And he told me of his background in growing up as a farmer and as a Quaker and what that meant for some of the abolitionist movements, for example, and what that meant towards the freedom rides of people who just wanted to be able to lean into those words. That's why you hear us say it a lot, the commitments that we made on paper. I know he believed in that. And so on that note and in that way, we found a deep respect for each other in this building and the commitment that I know many of us will live into in regards to Hugh's legacy is to remembering that statesmanship, and that there is always a space for us to find commonality, specifically because we are all in this building and something brought us here. So thank you again to the family for sharing him with us. Thank you for all of our colleagues for the work that you have done also to live into that legacy and the way of doing this work.
Representative Byrd.
Well, I will just start by saying I feel so privileged to be able to speak today about Hugh in this chamber. He was such a wonderful human being. I don't want to be teary about this, but I think, I hope that this comment resonates with many of us. There are families that we are blessed to be born to, and then there are the families we are blessed to build. And when I met and got to know Hugh, I knew he would be part of that family that I built, a family of wonderful friends and supportive people that I hoped to have known much more than just the 4 years that I was able to know him. I first met Hugh when I was first elected, and I think much like Assistant Majority Leader Bacon, got a chance to meet him during one of these events. There's a great nonpartisan group that pulls together legislators from both parties to just really kind of talk to us about the institution and how important it is that, we're all coming off of campaigns. It's time to put partisanship aside. We are here because this is democracy, and we're here to solve problems for the people of our state. And of course it would be Hugh who would lead such an effort. Such a wonderful human being who just so believed in democracy and loved this institution. I'm always charmed by the relationship he had with our former chief clerk, Marilyn Edens. He loved her, she loved him. Everybody loves Hugh. I suppose that goes without saying to say that somebody loved Hugh. But they were so close, and they took care of the institution that we have, this chamber. And this is part of why I feel so honored to be standing here to talk to you about him right now. I'm going to share some fun stuff that Hugh and I did together. So I was very bold my first term as a legislator and decided, I'm going to have a bipartisan town hall. I really believe that stuff that they're telling us. We need to go out. We're here to go talk to people who think differently from us, and I'm going to go to Loveland. So Hugh invited me to come up and do a bipartisan town hall, and I think that might be when I first met Amy, which happened to have this occurred right after we had passed a slew of bills that weren't appreciated by many, many constituents in Hugh's district. So I happened to be the one Democrat to be at this town hall and have the opportunity to explain, give a rationale, why did I think any of this was a good idea, and didn't I know I was ruining the state of Colorado? Well, Hugh was wonderful to stand next to me through all of this, and it turned out to be fine. These people, it was great for me to hear from them, and it all ended on a positive note. Then I will say, fast forward another month or two later, now Commissioner Kraft-Tharp and I, she was then Representative Kraft-Tharp, she and I hosted a town hall, and Hugh came to Westminster. And so we did our bipartisan town hall. Well, let me tell you, the environment was completely different. My constituents, I am certain they liked Hugh better than they liked me. He charmed everyone in the room, had great answers, and you could see people saying, wow, I just never thought of it like that. Well, nobody looked at me like that in Loveland, but Hugh was magical. Again, everyone loved Hugh. I still love Hugh. I come back to this chamber, and I just lie to myself, and I tell myself that he's term limited. That's why I don't see him. So I'm going to stop here, but thank you for listening to me, indulging me, and all of you, let's all be more like Hugh.
Just one announcement. I've heard a few cell phones making some noise here, so if everyone could please just check and make sure your cell phone's on silent, that would be appreciated. Madam Speaker McCluskey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. Since losing our dear friend Hugh, I have reflected often on what he meant to me as a colleague, mentor, and friend. He and I were assigned floor desks, I believe where Rep. Lindstedt and Rep. Martinez sit today. And there is something important about those assignments. For those of you who've been around a while, you know all about those utterly unexpected and exciting moments that arise in this chamber, and how by sheer circumstance we share in those moments with the person seated next to us. There are endless opportunities for listening and learning, sharing, policy making, and debating. And all of those exist in this opportunity, not just when we stand at the well, but with the person we sit elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder, day after day. Hugh was eager to get to know me, share his musings on the business of the day, and bait me endlessly with his keen political insight and intellect. We spent several late nights sharing our distinctly different perspectives on an endless list of policy topics. But every conversation, every disagreement, every bit of curiosity that we shared with one another in understanding each other made me a better legislator and ultimately, I hope, a better person. When our disagreements bloomed in emotion or frustration, he was quick to bring me back to the power of this place and this space. The power of this space, this chamber, this institution. It was a prize, a reverence he held deep in his heart. His awe for the majesty of Beulah red marble, rose onyx, as some of us call it, the brass, the arches, the endless details of a building. And while his fascination for the architecture of this Capitol was that of a man who was a crafter, a man who liked to fix things and build things, it was deeply mixed with his sense of pride in public service and his dedication to democracy. In those moments when I wrestled with my conscience and my position and my vote on a piece of policy, Hugh brought me back to the power of this space and this place. He may have provided a bit of levity in helping me lighten up, keep perspective, remember my kids who were maybe in trouble or doing something else. Hannah and Aiden, he loved you dearly, shared lots of stories, mostly good. But he would help me worry less about the intricacies of a policy for just a moment, and did what he did time and time and time again, and remind me of the tremendous honor and privilege we have in this room, in this space, for such a limited period of time, for those that we represent. He reminded me of that with his whole heart and soul, and his limited period of time is at moments very hard to bear. His laugh, that booming, infectious, love life laughter, is something I will miss deeply, especially in the days and weeks ahead. He and I had talked about the relationship we might share if we were both selected to assume leadership roles. We talked about our commitment to continuing these deep discussions as we had in our first year together, but broadening the audience. We had made a promise to lift up and learn from conflicting perspectives, to invest ourselves in better understanding one another, and to role model a democratic process that we and Coloradans could be proud of. The spirit of Hugh McKean will forever live in this chamber as maybe the ghost of policy past, present, and future. And I am dedicated to keeping his spirit, his commitment to honorable discourse, to civil discourse, to learning from one another, to bringing our best selves to this work every day. Minority Leader Lynch, to you and your party, to your members, I am deeply honored to serve with all of you. Thank you for taking the mantle of leadership. during such a turbulent time. You have risen in a way that makes all of us proud. I look forward to sharing the journey of our days ahead with you, with everyone in this chamber. And again, may all of us bring that spirit of a man who is deeply committed to doing this job right. Thank you.
Are there any other current members of the House who would like to speak? Representative Weinberg.
Wow, I haven't been down here before. And McCluskey, you didn't help me with your crying. Ladies and gentlemen of this body, my name is Yaron Weinberg. I am the House District 51 replacement for Hugh McKean. Those that know me, and if you don't, Hugh and I never saw eye to eye. But we always talked, we discussed. It was odd for the fact that the day before Hugh's passing, I saw him at a Joe O'Dea rally up in Larimer County, Loveland. And he was exhausted. Always a big smile on his face, always happy, regardless whether he liked me or not. Pretty sure he's either rolling in his grave right now that I'm in the seat, or he's laughing at me because I'm sitting in the minority. It's almost humorous that I come down to the minority itself. But Hugh hugged me the night before. And it was weird. It was just weird. And as they say, all his friends, and everyone says, this awkward hug. And he's a big man. And we talked. We talked about the future of House District 51. We talked about his future, moving out. What is he going to do next? Is he going for commissioner? We talked. And at that point in time, Hugh wasn't House District 51, and I wasn't the chairman of the Republican Party. We were people. And that's what the hardest thing is coming down here, because as you'll all figure out very quickly, I'm not a politician. I can't speak like you guys on the fly. Hopefully I learn it. It's very impressive. But the first day coming in and talking to people around the building, I was introduced as the Hugh McKean seat. And you would instantly see people light up. And they would look at me and measure me to that seat and their big shoes. And I'm aware. I commit myself to working with everyone in this body. We are going to have very fundamental disagreements, but I promise you, I will share a glass of whiskey or a beer, or if you're into coffee, doesn't matter. I commit, truly, for the next 2 years, to bring anything that I can to make sure that this seat would be honored for the McKean seat. And you will always see me smiling, I will always be joking, and I'll always have the memory of McKean in the back of my mind, regardless of what each thought of each other. The last thing I'll share, which is very weird the other day, I was going through a McDonald's drive-thru because I was starving, because this place sucks. It really does. I found myself in the mentality of talking to Hugh McKean in my car, of asking him, how? How did you do this? And why the heck do I have to do it now? I don't know why I'm here. I'm still finding that calling and that reasoning. It's not easy, but I find myself talking to Hugh on these drives back and forth, which I'm pretty sure he did the same, was driving back and forth from Loveland. So I truly, with all honor, hope he rests in peace. I hope the man is with God. And I ask here in this body on this floor that he cherished so well and did such a good job at. He was a good politician. I'm learning that very quickly with the comparison of how bad I am as a politician. I hope that he would embody into the spirit, and I hope that he would help me through this session, these two, the 74th and the 75th. And I can honestly say that I love Hugh McKean, and I love what he embodied. I love that he loved Loveland, and I embody the same. And I hope to do him proud during these 2 years of session. Thank you for hearing me out.
Representative Bockenfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hugh and I grew up in the Midwest together. He was from northern Missouri. I was from west central Illinois. Not too far apart. A little older than he was, but we had some common stomping grounds, so we used to talk about that all the time. And I used to tell Hugh, I say, Hugh, I know how you think. And he goes, I know how you think too. But what I learned from Hugh McKean, we served together, and I don't remember if it was on Finance Committee or Judiciary our first year. When you come in as a new legislator, a lot of times you think there's just a yes and a no button. But I would sit next to Hugh, and they'd present a bill, and he'd say, what do you think? And I go, I hate it. No way I'm going to vote for it. And he said, well, Rod, is there any way you can make it better? You don't have to vote for it, but don't pass up the opportunity to make it better. And that's one of the things that I learned from Hugh. When they tell you he loved this institution, he truly did. He believed in it, but I learned from him, you can still vote against the bill, but try to make it better for the best interest of your constituents. And so we used to do that. But Hugh and I we'd get into debates sometimes, and they talk about this hugging thing that he did. And it kind of drove me crazy because we get into debate and he'd get up and he'd give me that hug. You know, that one that everybody says made him uncomfortable? Well, what made it worse than is he had that beard. And that beard on my bald head I'm already uncomfortable, and it's like, okay, this is like double. The day before Hugh passed, I called him. We had a good conversation. And he sounded tired. And that's all I say is he sounded tired. So rest in peace, my friend. Thank you.
Assistant Minority Leader Puglisi.
Thank you. I wasn't intending on speaking today, but I felt incredibly compelled to kind of tell my story of Hugh. I didn't get to know Hugh as some of my colleagues did for as long, but between after my primary and through literally the day before he passed, we were in consistent contact. And so I remember in January of 2021, I termed out as commissioner, still loved following the legislature, didn't actually expect to be here, but still loved the legislature. And I was watching a town hall that Mary Ann Goodland had actually put on with Colorado politics. And there was Hugh McKean in like grubby clothes, putting a house together as he was on the Zoom. And I was like, who is that guy? And what is he doing? And I remember him saying something about, well, we still have to work. And I was like, oh, I like him. I want to get to know him better. And, things happened. I got through the primary, and Hugh and I talked a lot. And he was always very encouraging. And he was like, hey, Rose, I need you to do more. I need you to do more. I need you to do more. I'm sorry. I need you to do more. And I stepped up every time because I didn't want to disappoint him. And those big hugs, he'd come up to me and say, thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for what you're doing for our party, because I know how much you love it. And I really appreciated that. And the day before, I remember going into his office and talking to him, and he was like, Rose, we're going to be in the majority, and here's what I need. And I was like, okay, can we talk about what happens if we're still in the minority? And he was like, nope, we're not going to talk like that. And I was like, okay, but I just need to process. So I really just need to know what happens. And he was like, nope, we're not going to talk about it. And then he threw his rule book at me, which still sits on my desk in my office, Amy, and said, go learn the rules. And I was like, I don't have time to learn the rules. I've got all these things that you've just told me that you needed me to do. I can't do it all. And he was like, you'll get through it. Don't worry about it. And so I think about Hugh a lot, especially in these weeks now that I'm actually here and dealing with our great people on both sides. And I think about him a lot. I will say, for those of you in the room who know Amy Stevens, if you ever need to get bad news, please get it from Amy. She basically called me on a Sunday morning. My kids were going crazy. We're trying to get ready for church. And she's like, I need you to stop for a minute. And I was like, okay. I was like, what's going on? And I was like, what campaign did I forget to help on? Who did I forget to call back? And she was like, Hugh McKean had a heart attack. He passed away. You need to step up. There's no time to process this. She's like, you're a processor. There's no time to process this. She's like, we have 1 week left, and I need you to stay on your game. And then she was like, and I got to go, bye. And I was like, I don't understand what just happened. And so it took a while for me to process what had actually happened and then continue on the game. But we were doing it for Hugh. And so it was a great motivator. And then I wasn't expecting to be in the legislature. I wasn't expecting to be the assistant minority leader. And on election night, when everybody's like, here's where we're at, people were like, you're gonna have to step up. And when I was voted by the caucus to be the assistant minority leader, I was deeply and incredibly honored and very overwhelmed. And I really struggled, and I continue to struggle with the fact that I shouldn't be here. But I am, and I'm here because he's not. And I have a hard time with that. But I know that he's still with me every day. And I know that he's kind of whispering in my ear, and on those days where I'm like, I can't do this, he's helping me to push forward. And he's helping us all to push forward, every single one of us. And so I'm deeply grateful. I'm deeply grateful for Amy. I remember seeing him at something, and he was like, you gotta meet my girl, Amy. She's incredible. You'll really like her. And I do really like you. And so I'm excited to get to know you better. I wish he'd be at dinner with us the way Scott James talks about dinners. I would have really loved to have been a part of that. So we'll just have to make some new dinners for Hugh. So anyway, thank you for letting me share my story with you. I really appreciate it. And we're gonna do this for Hugh. So thanks.
Representative Armagost.
Thank you, Speaker Pro Tem. I didn't get to know, I wasn't fortunate enough to know Hugh for very long, but I was fortunate enough to know him during my campaign and running for this. When the redistricting happened, I had a friend reach out to me that told me I needed to throw my name in the hat for District 64. And knowing nothing about state legislature at the time, she told me the first person I needed to talk to was Hugh McKean. And so, of course, in my decision process, the first phone call that I made was to Hugh. And having that first phone call, that first conversation, he sold me on the good and bad, but Hugh had a way of making the bad sound good. So everything that he told me was ultimately what convinced me to run for this seat. And I was also fortunate to be one of the people that can attest to hearing in our first conversation the I love you from Hugh McKean. And his last words in that first conversation were, I love you, you've got this. And I did. And it ended up being a success, but I definitely owe a lot of that to the phone calls I was able to make throughout my campaign, being in neighboring districts with him, and getting the push of support and the nudges that I needed to keep my head straight in this, and also talking to Rep. Lynch, great leadership that we've had, and it's also great to see that you stepped up to take this on as our minority leader. And not knowing we were going to be the super minority, I can still hear those words ringing from Hugh, you've got this, because we all do need to do that. And I think hearing everyone talking about everything we all need to practice better, being more like Hugh, I think needs to ring true, especially in this body. Just the fact that he was able to reach across and talk to anyone about anything and put everything into a good perspective and get everyone at least on the same page of understanding the good behind everything, no matter how much we disagree on anything and everything. There's always a middle ground that we can reach. And he had a great way of letting us all know that and reminding us of that. And I think we need to continue that, and I hope that we do in this House, and we can all be more like Hugh. And remember to remind each other of that. And it's okay to repeat the words that he did. And I love you. You've got this. Just keep those words ringing in the back of your mind like I do. Thank you.
Representative Catlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. It's an honor to serve with you.
It's an honor to serve with you as well.
Thank you, sir. Hugh McKean was a friend of mine, more than just in the legislature. I talked to him a number of times on the phone. Sometimes he would pull me back from the cliff's edge. But then there were some days where we sat here, I sat behind him, and I'd pull him back. It was a good relationship. We shared a lot of things. You know, I'm from the country, I'm out in the country raising crops and doing those things, but his background, coming from a farm when he was a kid, he kind of understood. He understood John Deere tractors. He understood what it was like to bake in the sun when all your buddies are down at the pool hall, drinking whatever they could let you have. So he understood that. And he understood this building. He understood the people on both sides of the aisle, which is a great skill. There are days when I hope that I understand everybody, but most of the time I don't even understand the guy that's sitting in that seat where I'm sitting. Because my emotions run wild, I get high, I get low, I get bummed, I get super happy, whatever. I think everybody in here does. That's probably one reason we're legislators. We feel things. We feel them big. We feel them, tough. He embodied that with us. His ability to feel those emotions, share those emotions. He tried to put those hugs on me. I told him, I don't want that. So you try harder. And it got to be kind of a give and take. He was good for me. He was good for you. Even if you hadn't been here, he was good for you. Because you hear people coming up here and saying, if we could be more like, if we acted more like, then we would be better. And I think that's true. I think one of the things that I got from him is the way he felt about the staff. The people that helped this room work, he really cared about. It wasn't about just, hey, we love you guys. It was true and it was real. And you could feel that when he came down here and he talked about the staff. He never missed a chance to congratulate them or thank them, which is one of the things I hope we will keep, that we don't forget that, how important they are, because they were important to him. So that helped me, but I didn't realize, Marilyn and Robin and everybody that takes care of my desk and all those things. He truly loved that. That gives you a pretty good indication of who he was. The minority leader cared more about the staff than he probably did his colleagues, which is okay with me because that's where it happened. Because we'll go in the caucus room and we'll have the arguments and we'll do all those kind of things that we're supposed to do to pass good, meaningful legislation, but it's the staff that helps us keep it done. That kind of showed me what kind of man he was, because I'm hoping to be like that. That the people that help me are the ones that are important to me. This $5 name tag gets me into a lot of doors, but, it doesn't get me the job done. It's the people around me that are helping me. Hugh McKean helped me. He helped me be a better guy about how do I make sense of a piece of legislation that I didn't know anything about until it laid right here in front of me, and now I'm expected to give a decision. He helped with that. He was very sharp at those kind of things. But he was also good about helping me with stuff that would get me out of myself. He'd send me text pictures of him in Dove Creek, Colorado, which is in my district. You know, a big selfie picture, him and Amy. Hey, I'm in your district. So I called him on the phone and said, what the hell are you doing there? And I think that kind of took him by surprise. But that was the kind of relationship I had with him, is that he was fun. But when it got tough, he could be as tough as anybody else. But he was fun. And I think we miss that sometimes. Some days this is not fun. Today's not fun. But letting that bunch of people, family, friends, loves, know how important he was to us is part of my job, but it's also part of my friendship. It's also part of my responsibility to let those of you who did not know him to know what he was like. He was a good guy. He was a good man. He was a good dad. I think he was a good friend. He was one of those people that would give you something without asking for something back. But he was a good enough politician that if it was political, he would give you something to get something back. Every one of us know that. But it wasn't a demand that you couldn't meet. So that was one of the things I learned from him. His negotiating style was good. His public was always good. But his private was just as good. You know, there's a lot of times we meet people that are in public, they're just wonderful, lovely people. But when we get behind the closed doors, they're kind of wolfish, maybe, or hard to deal with, too demanding, want too much. He always wanted too much, but he did it in a way that you could say, sorry, I can't go that far. And he'd be okay. But if it got down to the brass tacks, there were places he would not go past. And I think we all want to be like that. We have a horizon we can't go across. If we are aware of that horizon, we can share it with people that we deal with. We can do that as gentlemen and ladies. And hopefully, that kind of instructions that came from Hugh McKean, we can carry out. You know, I was lucky I had people that cared about me, that helped train me. There's one standing in the back of the room. Don Coram. He was a friend of McKean's too. But these guys helped show me how I could do this. Because when I got here, I had no idea. It was like a fire hose. So, you know, I got appointed on the 7th of January and sworn in on the 11th of January, and everybody said, hey, here you are. I didn't know where the bathroom was, let alone how to do this. But Hugh McKean took me under his wing. First thing he did for me is my flashlight came on in my phone. And I had no idea how to even turn it off. I was wandering around with my flashlight sticking out. He came and said, Catlin, your flashlight's on. I said, whoa, I didn't know that. I said, I can't turn the damn thing off. So he took it out of my pocket, turned it off. He said, I'll get with you on that. That's how we got to be friends. That's the first thing he did for me. Little tiny things like that add up. So, you know, I don't want to go on and on and on. I could, because he could. He was a great speaker down here. He did good things for us. He did good things for the other caucus. He did good things for this building and for the tradition, which is, I think, what he passed on to me, is the love of what this building and this room and these people can and will do, because we have done. Look at the history of this state. Look at what we have done. Look at where we've come in this state because of the legislature in this state. All the people that we're standing on their shoulders, so to speak. He's one of them. I think as time goes forward, he'll be one of those people that we greatly remember. and that we will honor, because he was able to be partisan, but he was also able to be nonpartisan, bipartisan, which is something I know that I'm hoping when I'm done here, people will say he was a statesman. But that's going to be up to you folks, because I believe that Hugh McKean was a statesman. And to me, that's one of the greatest honors that we can say about our colleagues, is he was a statesman. He cared about this state. He loved Loveland. He was selling Loveland every time he was down here. In fact, I'm wondering about Valentine's Day. How are we going to handle that? But folks, I'm better for having known him. I'm probably going to be better because I remember him. And I still have that picture of him in Dove Creek, Colorado. Thank you.
Minority Leader Lynch.
Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, under Rule 26F, I request that we recess to allow senators and former members to speak.
The House will be in recess. Minority.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce some of the former representatives that will be speaking today. Representative Kevin Grantham, Representative Matt Gray, Representative Tracy Kraft Tharp, and Representative Lori Sane.
Thank you. We will proceed to hear from former members of the House first, and then we will proceed to senators who also wish to address. I wasn't sure if that was a specified order, or should we go in just whichever order people prefer? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I thought of one of the first meetings I ever had with Hugh when I walked in here today and realized I don't know most of you, and I worked here a few months ago. There's a lot of new faces around here, and when I was about as long as the new folks have been here, about as long as Hugh and I had been here, I was given a job by one of my committee chairs. I was on the local government committee. We used to just have a local government committee. And I'm a local government attorney by background, and the chairman came to me, and Representative Kimmy Lewis had introduced a bill that was assigned to our committee that he thought could be problematic. And he asked me, did I think it could be problematic? And I said, yeah, I think it could. And so then I was like, okay. And I was talking to Hugh about it one day. I'd gotten to know Hugh by then, because I was a new guy. I was never been told, okay, go deal with another member's bill, because we were in the majority. We could just kill another member's bill, but we didn't want to do that. So you go talk to Kimmy Lewis, who many of you are unfortunate to have never met and will never get the chance to meet. And so I was telling Hugh about this. He's like, well, I'll come to this meeting. And I was like, well, Hugh, you don't have to do that. He's like, no, I want to help. And Hugh wanted to help. So we came in, and he was a city councilman. He knew local government pretty well as well. And we walked in, and we sort of explained, okay, here's the situation with the bill, and here's the problems that it could create. Now, again, another thing many of you will never get to experience in your life is being yelled at by Kimmy Lewis. The few of you who do. Being yelled at by Kimmy Lewis was an experience. I've never been yelled at I've been yelled at by a lot of people in this building. I have never been yelled at anybody like Kimmy Lewis. And the bill that she had introduced was trying to fix a problem that was going on in Backett County. And no, I've also never met anybody who's loved Backett County more than Kimmy Lewis. And she just yelled at us for like 10 or 15 minutes. And then eventually we heard her about the problem that was in her district and her community. And we're like, well, Kimmy, can we think maybe we can find a way to solve that problem and not create these problems over here? And then Kimmy was like, oh, sure, yeah, that would be great. We could do that, no problem. So Hugh and I sat with Kimmy, and we wound up figuring out a solution. We took it back to committee and wound up passing a law. But the weird part to me was the fact that Hugh wanted to be in that room. And he didn't have to be. There was no part of his job as a new legislator that required him to first go in there and do something that I was asked to do with me. And second of all, just get yelled at the time. Because I can laugh about being yelled at by Kimmy Lewis now. I was absolutely terrified at the moment. I was a brand new person too. I was like, this is going to create an incident. It's going to be a whole thing. I've messed this up. But he was sitting right there next to me. And it was the start of me learning something more about Hugh, is that he did say I love you all the time. I also do that a lot, and I not as much as him, but also have had some long looks here. But he didn't just feel love for people, and he didn't just say that he loved people. He loved people with his actions. And love as an emotion and love in action are two very different things. And he crossed that line. You're not, as you work here, you're not going to find that many people who are just going to be outright mean to your face. Though it'll happen, but it won't be that way. But there's a huge difference between not wishing someone harm and actively taking the time and steps to love them. And Hugh did the latter as much as anyone I've ever seen here. I won't talk more about his personality this well because I spent a lot of time down with him also. But Hugh wasn't just loving and he wasn't just kind when he was doing his job. It wasn't just when he was down here in the well or leading his caucus or sitting in a committee. He thought about individual people in this chamber all the time and what they needed and reached out to them. And in a way that a lot of people didn't fully understand because he didn't brag about it and he didn't talk about it. I'm sure there are people in this room right now, I know for a fact there are people in this room right now, that he did immense things for them as humans, as people, when they needed something that only they know about and nobody else in this room knows about. I am one of them, and I know that there are others, because I noticed it when he was doing it, and we would talk about it sometimes. And sometimes when it would get hard, we ran a few bills together, but we talked about a lot of personal things. But the takeaway I would have for you about Hugh is that he did love this institution. He loved it to death and wanted to take care of it. But if he had to choose between saving this institution and saving the people in it, I assure you he let the institution go. He was about people way before he was about anything else. He was great at all those other things. But also, if I walked up to him at any time and said, he's in the middle of a debate and said, I really need you, man, I need to step outside for a second, he would walk out in a heartbeat. If the most important debate that we had all year, he'd walk out in a heartbeat. And that's what I would commend to you as you do your work. And I can't speak for Hugh, but I'll tell you, looking back at my time here, my greatest memory and the thing I'm most proud of is not any piece of legislation. It's not one committee vote I won. It's not one smart point I made. The greatest thing, the thing I'm most proud of is a time when my friends needed help and they needed someone to come and help them, and I was willing to take risks to help them as humans, not for any particular policy. And my greatest regret of the time that I had here were times that I did things that hurt somebody else who was here. Not that I lost the bill. Not that there was a policy I wish I could have passed, but I didn't get through it. It's that I did something to hurt people here. And that is, in my mind, what I remember most about Hugh. I remember all of the other stuff. But he was a genuine human who it wasn't just kind to you. He didn't just laugh with you. He didn't just give you a hug and said, I love you. But he was thinking about what's going on in your life. Where are you right now? How can I come meet you where you are? And it's a lesser known part of what he did because he didn't brag about it. He didn't talk about it. And you didn't see it here at the well. It happened in other rooms. It happened inside rooms. It happened on the phone. 6 years ago, I was one of the new people here, and in that meeting, I met with Hugh McKean and Kimmy Lewis, and it feels really new right now, and 6 years ago wasn't that long ago. But also, this job can teach you really quick. Sometimes things can be pretty fragile. I miss both of them a lot. I would never have guessed on that day where we're having a meeting about a bill in the local government committee that I'd be standing here 6 years later and having lost both of them. And so what I would ask as things get hard is to always check in with yourself each day and think about how you're treating the humans here and how you can see and help the humans here before, during, and after the time that you're creating the policy, before, during, and after the time you're taking care of all the constituents that you represent. Make sure that you're taking care of the people, of the humans that you see here, and that will be living Hugh's legacy just as much as every single joke, and you should make jokes, and just as much as every act of politeness, acts of love are a great way to honor his legacy as well. Thank you.
I see two former representatives in the well before we proceed to senators. Did either of them want to speak? I'm just following the script. Representative Commissioner Kraft-Tharp.
Thank you. This is my first time being back in the chamber during session, and I got to tell you, it's really weird. What's very strange is so many of you I don't know. Welcome, and some of you, it's really good to see you all again. It's hard for me to believe that this is what we're here for. Matt Gray and I talk about one of the best benefits that you get as being a state legislator is having your memorial service. No matter if you die a year after, 10 years, 50 years later, this is one of the benefits that you have. And we would talk all the time about what we want in our memorial service, and Hugh was oftentimes part of those conversations. I worked with Hugh on the business committee. I was honored to serve as the vice chair and as the chair while I was here. And Hugh was the ranking member. We worked in partnership. We worked in partnership to make sure that we could look at what were the best bills for Colorado. How can we provide the best guidance, the best policy for Colorado? And we were partners. It was working together. Hugh and I did many bills together. I sat over here, and he sat right over here, and there was a whole group of very funny people. And Hugh was there's a quorum in the back. Hugh was somebody who, it wasn't about party. It wasn't about ideological differences. It wasn't about values. We knew our values. We knew our ideology. We didn't expect from each other that would be challenged or changed or confronted. It wasn't about working across the aisle. It was about two people. And it was about two people appreciating and recognizing some of the absolute absurdity of what happens down here. And to have somebody that would recognize that and that you could laugh until you were giggling about it. It was somebody that you could every day get support from, get guidance from, just be with. The story I warned the honorable representative that I would tell this story. When he died, Matt Gray, who is my mentee, Matt Gray let me know. He was in my dreams every night from when he died until the funeral. Every night he would show up in a different dream. And in my dreams I would say, leave me alone, number one. I need to get to sleep. But number two, it was like, why are you here? Why are you coming to me? At the funeral, Amy and I talked, and she said, he's not coming to me. I want to talk to him. I want to be with him. And so that night I went home, and in my dreams I said, you need to leave me. You need to go. Amy needs you. You need to be with her. And she told me today that he has come to her in her dreams. Hugh is a friend. He is a friend. It's easy for me because I'm not here to just ignore it and to deny that he's gone. But he was always just a plain good guy who was dedicated to the state, dedicated to what we do, dedicated to how we do it, and I was honored to just be able to serve with him. Thank you.
Representative Commissioner Sane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. It's an honor to serve with you, or was an honor to serve with you.
It's an honor to serve with you as well.
Members, of course, despite why we're here, it's a pleasure to see you today, and it's an honor to address you today. I can only weakly add to the sentiment that was in Commissioner James' prayer this morning, and no one would argue that Hugh really flipped this dynamic on the over-exuberance of the spirit of love for everyone in the room that he was in. In a sense, he made Loveland wherever he was, because where he was, the highest value, love, overflowed from the one whom he reflected, his Lord Jesus. And in the spirit of changing that dynamic, I would humbly offer the following definitions. In the dictionary, a humanist is a philosophical stance that emphasizes the individual and social potential and agency of human beings, whom it considers the starting point for serious moral and philosophical inquiry. Allow me to humbly offer a new potential definition before that one. A humanist, an H-U-G-H, a philosophical stance that emphasizes that human relationships matter more than political stance. That optimism is not optimal or optional. Gratitude is essential, and that hugs are more effective than a handshake. And above all, unconditional love is the greatest agency for human beings. The spirit of love is often best facilitated and multiplied by breaking bread together and meeting people where they are. And one of those venues that Hugh excelled in was cooking and sharing that cooking. And therefore, after a very short conversation with Speaker McCluskey, that I think went something like this: chili cook-off? Yes. This is your official announcement that the Hugh McKean Best in Dome Great and Honorable Chili Cook-Off Trophy is up for grabs this year. And it's up to Speaker McCluskey if she wants to invite the Senate, because I still maintain that they can't cook. But in the meantime, know that you are loved by the same God whom Hugh probably gave the biggest hug the nanosecond he was in his presence. And on earth, the only eternal thing of importance that transcends to the other side of heaven, the one thing that Hugh best concentrated on was you. The person right in front of him that he couldn't pass up without giving a hug or some encouragement. And if you notice, a hug slows you down. In the bustle of business, it gives you a momentary reset on what is actually important. And whether your path to this chamber was unexpected or it was sought, and while the saying is fortune favors the bold, there is another saying, love conquers all. And even in the daily bustle of life, perhaps one of the most important things we can do is slow down, see the human being in front of us, and love them in the very best way that you can, even if you aren't a hugger. Then everyone can participate in a new, more optimistic definition of a humanist. Thank you.
Minority Leader Lundin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I tell you what, there's a number of things I miss about the House. This being one, the water cooler conversations at the front of the room as well. One thing I don't miss, quite frankly, is the slideshow. How can you compete with that as a speaker when you have these slides of a life well and fully lived going on behind you? That is challenging. So we're going to go through a physical exercise together first. Those of you who knew Hugh know the Hugh smile, right? So big toothy smile, right? As big as you can get, and then open your mouth. All right, come now with me, everybody. Give me the Hugh smile. That's it. I'm looking across the room. Very good. They're very good. You know, it is a communication, obviously, of love. So we've all heard and we've all experienced, those who knew Hugh, many aspects of who he is: statesman, policymaker, partisan. This last year, Hugh and I did a road show. He was raising money for the House, I was raising money for the Senate, and it was our tradition as we would encounter each other at the many, many stops along that road show that we would alternate giving each other kisses on the forehead. Now, I obviously had a really big target when I was kissing him on the forehead. I am growing my target bigger, but that was one of the ways that Hugh and I exchanged the affection that you all know he shares. Hugh was clearly a representative of the people. He cared deeply about that, and a respecter of traditions. The way he respected this building, more importantly, though, the people who serve in this building, is part of how he respected and loved tradition. But the biggest things about Hugh that I remember, that I think we all know, were his human nature, the way he was a human being first. And he saw each and every one of us as a human being first. He was tough, but civil. He was a builder and a creator. He was a friend to all of us, and those of you who didn't really get to know him, he would have been your friend too. It's a given. He was an incredible partner to Amy. And in many ways, he was a professional partner to so many of us. At his core, as you've heard from, I think, every speaker, and the common thread of every presentation you've heard, and quite frankly, everything you know about Hugh if you knew Hugh, at his core, the main event, the central story, the primary thing, was a loving human being with an overflowing love. Why? Why? How did that happen? Let me offer up an idea. I believe it was Hugh's faith. He had an obvious commitment to his faith, and he lived it out in every way and every day. He, in fact, had committed his life to the author and creator of love. When you have that kind of a direct connection, it is really easy to have a lot of love in who you are and what you pass on. He was connected to the very definition of love. God is love. Hugh was a Christ follower, which is the ultimate story in the arc of humanity, the ultimate story of love, grace, and forgiveness. He loved us, Hugh loved us, as Christ loved us before we knew him. He just did. When you walked into the room, he was anticipating you, and he was loving you. Now, as part of my doctrine, as part of Hugh's doctrine, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, the Holy Spirit indwells us. It gives us the ability, in a superhuman way, in a supernatural way, beyond human way, the ability to love. And that's a big part of what Hugh was about. Now, Hugh did not wear his faith on his sleeve, but Hugh did wear his faith on his sleeve. Hugh would never preach at you, as I'm kind of sort of bumping up against here now, but Hugh did live his faith in every way, in every interaction, in a meaningful way. And by so doing, he preached the gospel of his faith. Now, some of us tend to be buckets. We gather in this love, and it just sits inside of us. Hugh was so much not that way. He was a conduit. That love would flow into him and flow out as fast as it came in. He was an artesian well. Y'all know what that is. That's a place where you punch a hole in the ground and the water will not stop coming out. That is exactly who Hugh was. He was overflowing. So I would postulate, I would offer, and I think if Hugh were standing here today, and maybe Hugh would, through the Holy Spirit, whisper into your ear, I would argue right now that if you ever felt loved, genuinely loved, in a moment of interaction with Hugh, you might have felt the love of Christ flowing through Hugh. And in that, I think, is a key part of the story of Hugh McKean. So, here's to Hugh, a friend to all who had excess love because he was connected to the author of love. Here's to Hugh, a dear friend who pointed the way. Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, and I appreciate the ability of the House letting me come back for a minute to share a few thoughts on our dear friend who departed. My story with Hugh starts in a way that has touched many of us in this room. We had both just made it through tough primary in 2016. And I was kind of trying to understand kind of who the new class would be. Of course, in many of our districts, the primary is the election. We all know that. That's certainly the case in places like Denver and in Hugh's district in that cycle. And I was trying to really put some thought into action of how we could build some more connective tissue in the General Assembly before we ended up down at the well, before we ended up arguing about a bill or disagreeing on policy or our party positions. And remember in 2016, that was a tough election. We all know what happened in November. Country deeply divided. We came into that session, I think, feeling that here in this building. And I reached out to Hugh to see if he'd be interested in starting a bipartisan retreat. And just quickly, if I may ask, raise of hands, who's been able to participate in that over the last 4 cycles? I'm so proud of that work that I got to do with Hugh, and he was the perfect partner to do it, and he didn't hesitate when I reached out to him to start that endeavor. And we started it because we felt together this deep commitment that first and foremost, before we do any work together, it had to be about connecting as humans, not as a representative or a partisan, or I'm going to only fight for the partisan interest of my district. Certainly we do that. Certainly that is part of our job here as representatives in this republic that we serve. But first, we had to have a chance to connect as humans. So we were able to create this retreat together. He wrangled the cats on his side. I tried to wrangle the cats on my side. And we had the first version of that in 2016. We repeated it in 18. We repeated it in 20. And the day before he passed, I was in touch with him working on the 22 version. And I miss him so much. We didn't make a single noise about it. We just did that work together. And you've heard it a bunch of times today about that's what he did. And I wanted to share this other example that maybe hasn't been talked about, but so many of us at least had a chance to do that together. And I'm so grateful I got to do that work with you. I miss you, Hugh. I love you. I'm so glad that we get to honor you today. Thank you.
Senator Mullica.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I can still see Hugh's mannerisms today oftentimes when I close my eyes or they just randomly come to me. And I remember one of the first times I was in this chamber, and a quote that I like to think a lot about is, the judge of a person's character is how they treat someone who can do nothing for them or where they will get no benefit. And I remember seeing Hugh and how he interacted with our staff. And at that moment, I said that I need to get to know that man. And from that day on, we were friends. And like Representative Byrd, he invited me up to a town hall up in Loveland. And my experience was a little different than Representative Byrd's. There were several Democrats in this church that we were doing the town hall, and I got a question from one of them, and I laid it on thick, and I let my Democrat come out hard. And I remember at the end, and Hugh comes up to me and gives me that big old hug, and he tells me, just so you know, they can't vote for you. And that was our relationship, and I loved Hugh, and I know Hugh loved me. He would ask about my family, he would ask about my wife by name, and I had the opportunity to go to Casper, Wyoming with Hugh and Representative Will at the time, now Senator Will, and I I got to drive what should have been 3.5 hours. I think it was probably under 3 hours with the way Hugh was driving. He was a little bit of a crazy driver, but it was just Hugh and I in the truck. And I got to hear about Hugh's life and got to hear about his time in the Coast Guard Auxiliary. I got to hear about that house that he was building. And he would talk to me about this house, and I'm a nurse. I don't build things. But he would talk to me like I knew what he was talking about, and I could just nod along with him. But I think the thing that stuck with me about that trip is twofold. Is one, there's not a lot of Democrats in Wyoming. And Perry and Hugh took good care of me in a room full of a lot of Republicans, and I felt like it was a little bit of a freak show when I was there, and everyone was wondering what a Democrat was doing there. But the thing that stuck most with me was during that ride is that this job keeps us here late at night. This job takes a lot of time away from our families and away from our kids and wife, and Hugh talked a lot about his kids. And I've been thinking about what I would want people to say about me if I wasn't here anymore. And I spend a lot of time with you in this room, and I have spent a lot of time with you. And I hope you know how much your dad loved you. Amy, I hope you know how much he loved you and your kids, because he talked about you all the time. That trip, he talked about you. He shared stories about you. And I just hope you know how much he loved you. And I loved you, and I miss him.
Senator Pelton R.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. My journey with Hugh started 5 years ago or so, when Representative Becker decided he wasn't going to run for re-election. He said, the first person you need to get to know when you get to the Capitol is Hugh McKean. So I got Hugh's phone number. I gave him a call. First thing I noticed was, man, this guy really likes to talk. When I got to Capitol and met him in person, another piece of advice he gave me was, don't ever make Marilyn Edens give you the look. Because she gave it to me twice, but I'm a slow learner. But Hugh, the first time you met him, instantly you became friends. He wanted to know about my wife. When he met her, the big old hug, they were instantly friends. He found out my youngest daughter and her family live in Loveland. He wanted to meet him. So we were up there one weekend, and he came over and got to know them, the kids. He wanted to know everybody. He wanted to know what made them who they are. It was 2.5 years ago when he was thinking about running for minority leader. He was wanting to kind of shape his leadership team. That man would not leave me alone until I finally said yes. But he brought out the best in me. That's what he did to everybody that ever knew him, as far as I know. They brought the best out in them. So, Hugh was a great friend, and I miss him dearly.
Senator Smallwood.
Thank you, Mr. Pro Tem. I have no idea how this works, but I feel like I should raise it even higher just because we don't have this opportunity in the Senate. Amy, great to see you. Hugh's family, thank you for coming for this. I think it's as important to us as it is to all of you, probably. You know, they say that about funerals, but I'm only here for a couple of reasons. One, I never get a chance to cry in a different chamber, so this is quite an opportunity. And I know that if I'm lucky enough to see Hugh at some point in my life, when he comes down to visit me in purgatory and tells me, he would ask, you had this opportunity to talk about me and you blew it. You never came to the well, didn't come to talk. So I'm terrified of that. So I'm feeling pretty stupid. By the way, Rep. Gray, it's great to see you. You look fantastic. Being part of that 2016, 2017 group, Rep. Weissman, this is where we all got together. This is where we, I feel, became friends. Certainly became great colleagues at that period of time. And Hugh is, why I feel stupid is I was gonna start off by saying, Hugh is my best friend in the house. I love a lot of you dearly, but Hugh is my best friend in the house. But as I'm listening to everybody talk, it's like, well, of course, Mom, but he was everybody's best friend in the house. So like, you're not special. But he was. He was. I miss seeing him dearly. I miss our barbs that we traded all the time. I called him Hug, right? Because at the end, it's a silent H. I don't know if you knew that. A lot of you have been mispronouncing his name, but I just called him Hug because I knew it was a silent H. And he'd give me a hard time about being angry all the time, and I'd tell him he's putting on too much weight, and we would go back and forth. And I think that is actually the last thing I said to him was something like, "Man, we gotta get you on a different eating program or something." And he, traded other comments that I'm not gonna insult him with. But he was just what you saw was the real Hugh. When we got together, and we would multiple times a week, we wouldn't talk about policy because we disagreed a lot. We wouldn't talk about politics. We wouldn't talk about how things were going here. What we would talk about is the kids. We talk about Amy. We talk about the house. And what made Hugh so special, and what I want all of you to know, Hugh's family, is how I will be changed forever by Hugh is at that moment, he was completely present. And it wasn't about him. It wasn't how special he was. It wasn't what he was doing or what was going on. It was, hey, Jim, tell me about your kids. Tell me what's Ross doing. As a quick aside, when my very first session here, when Hugh and I first got together, it was Bring Your Child to Work Day. And I brought my then 10-year-old son to the Capitol, and I was walking him around, and you probably know where this story's going. He's like, oh, let me show him around. So you go back to the Senate, you go do stuff. So he literally, I'd known the man for less than 6 months. He's like, let me take him around. And so I went back to the Senate chamber, and Hugh literally took my 10-year-old around the entire Capitol, all the way up to the dome, around and back. And so to this day, he's graduating high school here in a few months. If we talk about the Senate, we talk about me going to work, he would be like, oh, what's Hugh doing, right? Not Rep. McKean or Mr. McKean. Is like, what's Hugh doing? So, losing Hugh was a tragedy to our family. So that's the kind of person he was. You all already know that. Thank you so much, Mr. Pro Tem, for giving me the opportunity to speak. And thank you for giving us Hugh, for allowing us the time that we got to spend with him, for being so generous with the time that he was able to give to us. And that's what I'm going to work on. It's being present. It's making that connection. It's not worrying about what's going on with policy or politics or people, but to really work to build those connections like Hugh was absolutely masterful at. So Hugh, buddy, I miss you. God bless you. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Will.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. I want to come up and say a few words about my good friend, Hugh McKean. You've heard a lot of great things. I'll keep my comments short, but you've heard a lot of great things about Hugh from all the speakers. All of that's true. I think to start off with, Hugh was just a great man. That's first and foremost. He was just a great man. And then that transferred into being a great legislator. He was also a wonderful mentor to me, coming into this chamber and not knowing anything. And he was a wonderful mentor to me. But I have to tell you, on a lighter note, losing Hugh, we were planning a hunt. And in fact, I talked to him just about a day and a half before his passing. We were on the phone, and he was so excited to come over on an elk hunt with me. And we were talking, and I'd kind of planned on taking the horses and mules and packing in a camp and maybe going to the cabin to do this hunt. And Hugh was more like, tell Suze, my wife, to get the spare bedroom ready for him. And then before I could even answer that, Hugh said, hey, don't you have one of those California Kings? I said, yeah, I got a California King bed. He said, shoot, I'll just bunk up with you and Suze. So that's just the kind of guy he was. And everyone loves you. I mean, to know him was to love him. I'm a little bit jealous listening to all this today about, I didn't know, we always parted with, love you, brother. But I thought he was just saying that to me. But it appears everyone here on the House floor heard the same thing from him, so I'm a little bit jealous. I knew he loved his family, he loved Amy, and we heard about that a lot. But I just have to say, he was a dear friend, and I truly did love that man. I did. When I say that, I mean it. He was such a great friend. Senator Molokai talked about our trips to Wyoming, to the governor's shoots and all. We just, without getting into details of that, we had such good times and such good laughs. And, one of the things I have to say, and Representative Byrd spoke, and I don't know what Hugh weighed when he came into this chamber. I know I came, when I first showed up, weighing about 173 pounds. I had the great honor, of sitting next to Representative Byrd. And I think she fed Hugh about the same way she fed me. And so I'm not thanking her for that, but she's very generous with her snacks. And anyway, we had that little group sitting back there, and we had a wonderful time. But all I can say is Hugh was a great man. God bless him and rest in peace, my friend. Thank you.
President Grantham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem. And Madam Speaker, if you'd indulge me just for a moment before I say some of the things that I intend to say today. I haven't got to do this for 4 years, and I know this is the other chamber, but I would like to impose a $10 fine on everybody who had a phone go off earlier today.
So ordered.
Excellent. Thank you. And I really appreciate that. Many of the things that were already said are things that have been going through my mind for the last several months. How do you distill anybody's life down into a few words, let alone someone like you? So I won't repeat a lot of that, but I will take the opportunity to set some of the records straight. This soup, this chili, is in fact Amy's. I think that's important to take note of. No hard feelings, though, right? Right? Okay. The red one was his. The red one was his. Some of the things that have been crossing my mind ever since that night in October. Senator Smallwood kind of alluded to this and others. But getting to know Hugh, and we only overlapped a couple years here,
and didn't get to work with him real directly, but I got to know him more so after I left, and getting to see the kind of person he was, because I had the opportunity to get to know him a lot because of the position he took here at that desk and the position that I held. And we got to talk a lot, especially over the phone, and the hugs, the laughs, the big laugh, and the serious moments too, and talking about this institution and the importance of that to him. But always, every conversation, that smile, and you could see it through the phone, right? And you could hear it in his laugh, just that boisterous personality. And every time I got off the phone with him or got done talking to him, I knew that, gosh darn it, I must be one of the most special people in the world, because that's how he treated me. And then in October, November, I started hearing this from everybody. And gosh darn it, I wasn't all that special, was I? Well, that's a fact. He was the one that was special in those interactions. It was always him. Seeing his love for this state, love for his constituents, for this body, for everybody on both sides of this aisle, even for those senators. He had a special affinity to everyone. How is that even possible? Everyone. And you know, there's very few people that come through this building, and we all have our moments in the sun, right? There's very few people that come through this building that make the mark that someone like Hugh did. I was trying to think the last time I got to stand here, because it's not very often senators get to do this and stand in this well. And I was reminded, I know some of you were here. I know Representative Commissioner Sane was here, but it was for a joint memorial for a former state representative, state senator, U.S. Senator Bill Armstrong. And very seldom do we get to come together as representatives, as senators, to honor someone in this fashion and see everybody come together. Hugh rises to that level. He rises to that level where we can all stand here and honor who he was. There are very few people in this institution, and not a slight against anybody in here. I call many of you friends and many of you colleagues, and have great memories and friendships going back. Representative Michelson Janae. And very few that I would say this about, but I aspire to be Hugh. I aspire to be like him. Sorry, I wasn't going to do this. There are good souls that we come across in our travels, and he was just one of them. And our loss is heaven's gain. But as one who is no longer sitting in one of those seats and talking to a bunch of you that will soon be one of those that is not sitting in one of those seats, I feel a little bit like Jacob Marley coming and rattling the chains and saying, I should have been more like Hugh in my time. But as Jacob Marley is talking to you, Ebenezer, you could still be more like Hugh. He did great working with everybody. Everybody felt better for having been around him. And I only wish from this point forward that I can be more like Hugh. Madam Speaker, Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak? Representative Woog.
Thank you. It's tough to be here, but it's good to be here. And I wasn't going to say anything. I was trying to think of things different that you all haven't shared. And without a doubt, Hugh lit up talking about his family. I mean, that's something I can never forget. And I think when I sat with him during second readings over there, where you guys are, he would ask about my family. I think it's because he knew how to ask how his family was. And that just put that huge smile on his face. And he had so much passion and energy to talk about you guys. I got to say, if anyone's campaigned with Hugh, man, it's not good. It's not good. I helped him out in a primary, and we were walking door to door. And I get down maybe 20 houses. I'm thinking, hey, we got to hit as many people as we can. Tell them what we're talking about, what we stand for, and keep moving. It's a numbers game. And I run into one of the other people helping, and they say, oh, no, Hugh's still at the first door. He didn't care. He didn't care. He literally wanted to connect with that person. I truly believe that. It was more important to him to make a connection with someone he had never met and learn about them and learn about what they cared about. And here I am trying to get through all these doors, even on my own campaign. Let's get through these doors, let's connect, but let's make it quick. I got to get these numbers, and that was not Hugh. It was absolutely about that person. And, you know, as what you guys have done here, we all know it's time away from family. And I'm sure at times it's very hard when your dad and your partner are away. But I truly believe he did that for you. His passion was his family. And maybe that wasn't always understood, but his passion, without a doubt, was his family. Thank you.
Seeing no other members wishing to speak, the House will come back to order.
Members, the motion before us is the adoption of House Memorial 1001. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion is adopted. Minority Leader Lynch.
Madam Speaker, I move the current roll call of the House be added to the as co-sponsors.
If there is no objection, the current roll call of the House will be added as co-sponsors to House Memorial 10001. Minority Leader Lynch.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, we'd like to say thank you to Hugh's family that's here and take a little time to recognize them.
Members, the House will be in a brief recess so that we may greet our guests. Members, the House will come back to order. Are there any additional announcements and introductions? Representative Joseph.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is an honor to serve with you.
And an honor to serve with you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have only one announcement, actually, from the Finance Committee. We have our meeting on Monday, the 30th at 1:30. We will be hearing 3 bills, HB 23-1016, HB 23-1015, HB 23-1021. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Woodrow.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just announcement, members. House State Civic, Military, and Veterans Affairs will be meeting Monday, January 30th to hear House Bills 1072 and 1057, 1:30 p.m. LSBA.
Thank you, Representative Woodrow. Representative Holtorf.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To my colleagues that are newly formed members of the Veterans Caucus, we're going to do a very quick huddle upon recess here down in the House Committee Room, and we'll hand out some information. And very quickly, I know we've got a lot of work to do, and there's people that need to leave today for a lot of different, very important reasons. So I just wanted to put that out. Madam Speaker, thank you.
Thank you. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Members, Legislative Legal Services has asked me to remind you about the delivery of bills for next Monday's introduction deadline. Your finalized bills will be delivered to the front desk for introduction unless you ask Legal Services to deliver the bill to you instead. If you wish to have a bill delivered directly to you instead of the front desk, you must have that bill completely finalized with your Legal Services drafter by 5 p.m. this Friday. If your bill is delivered to you, don't forget to turn it in to the front desk no later than 4:30 p.m. Monday afternoon. In addition, once a bill is delivered to the front desk or to you for introduction, it should not be returned to Legal Services for any reason. If the bill needs changes, please make sure those changes are made by amendment after it's introduced. If you want to add sponsors, the easiest way to do so is to use the electronic sponsorship program before your bill is introduced. The front desk can provide you with information regarding this process and can put you in contact with IT if you would like some additional assistance. If you have questions about adding sponsors, please contact the House front desk. The Legal Services staff thanks you. And I move the balance of the calendar to be laid over until Monday, January 30th.
Balance of the calendar will be laid over until Monday, January 30th. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that the House stand in recess until later today.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in recess until later today.